Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really jumping into something that's shifted gears dramatically.
Yeah, it really has. We're talking about this very dangerous escalation between Israel and Iran. Direct hits, retaliation.
Exactly. And where the U.S. fits into all this unfolding chaos.
So for this deep dive, we've gathered quite a few sources, articles, analyses, mostly from the last few days, trying to get a handle on the military actions, the threats flying back and forth, and the bigger picture.
Our goal here is really to sift through it all for you. We want to pull out the key insights, understand the different perspectives and capabilities, as they're described in these sources, and figure out why this should matter to you.
And just to set the scene, quickly, reports at this moment say commercial ships are still moving through the Strait of Hormuz. But make no mistake, tensions are sky high after these Israeli strikes and the Iranian response.
Okay, so let's walk through that sequence. It seems to be the trigger for this current heightened state of alert.
Right. Sources say Israel launched strikes inside Iran starting, last Thursday, June 13th?
Yeah, that sounds right. And Iran didn't wait around. They hit back pretty hard with missile attacks on Israel.
So this tit for tat, this direct exchange carried on through the weekend, it feels like a really significant shift.
Definitely. Now, Israel, in their statements reported in the sources, called their initial actions preemptive and a combined offensive.
And their stated goal, according to these reports, was Iran's nuclear program. Operation Rising Lion, I think, was the reported code name.
Yes, that's it. And the sources mentioned specific targets: Iran's Ministry of Defense HQ, the SPND nuclear project headquarters. That's the group linked to nuclear R&D, right?
Yeah, that's the one often cited. And other sites supposedly connected to the nuclear program. Israel also claimed they managed to destroy a lot of Iran's ballistic missiles before they could even be launched.
Big claim. And they also reported killing high-ranking Iranian commanders and scientists involved in those programs.
And after that initial wave, Israel said they followed up, hitting Iranian missile launchers, the ones actually firing back at them.
Okay, switching sides then. Iran's response. Besides the missiles.
Well, strong words. They vowed to escalate if Israel kept hitting them, and they launched those drone and missile attacks we mentioned, aiming at various places across Israel.
Did they claim specific targets?
They did. Iran said they went after fuel production facilities for Israel's fighter jets, and one senior commander, quoted in the sources, promised more severe blows. Pretty ominous.
And the human cost.
Yeah.
Israel reported, 10 deaths and about 180 injuries from those Iranian strikes.
Yeah, including civilians. Cities like Bat Yam near Tel Aviv and Haifa up north were mentioned, with reports saying homes were hit directly.
It really brings home the reality of these exchanges, civilians caught right in the middle.
Which leads us to something the sources really emphasize, Iran's military playbook. It's not just about conventional strength.
Right. It's more about asymmetry, isn't it?
Yeah.
Making things difficult for a more powerful opponent like the U.S. or Israel.
Exactly. Look at their missiles ranges up to 2,000 kilometers, covering the whole Middle East. You've got cruise missiles flying low, ballistic missiles arcing high, anti-ship missiles, a whole mix.
But the naval side, especially around the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, that seems like a major focus.
Oh, absolutely. Naval mines are a huge part of that. Relatively simple tech, but they can cause chaos. And Iran can apparently deploy them using all sorts of vessels, even small, fast boats and those hard-to-spot midget submarines.
So not just dropping mines and waiting, they can actively harass shipping too.
Yeah, the sources report incidents of teams on small boats planting limpet mines on ships, or even boarding and seizing civilian vessels. We've seen that happen.
And those fast attack boats you mentioned.
Many are armed with anti-ship cruise missiles. They train for swarming tactics, basically overwhelming a bigger ship with lots of small, fast, missile-armed boats coming from all directions. Plus, they have torpedoes, rockets on other platforms too.
What about those motherships or drone carriers the sources mentioned? Are those a big deal?
Well, the sources seem a bit skeptical about how effective they'd be in a major fight, maybe too vulnerable. But Iran, along with the Houthis, they're seen as pioneers in using those uncrewed surface and undersea vessels, basically kamikaze sea drones.
That sounds nasty.
It is. And you combine that with shore-launched missiles, other drones, the fast boats, especially in a narrow place like the Strait of Hormuz. One source called it a super missile and drone engagement zone.
The point being they can make passage through there incredibly risky.
Precisely. It's not about fleet-on-fleet battles. It's about denial, making it too dangerous to operate.
And if they did manage to seriously disrupt or close the strait,
global oil prices would spike immediately. Massive economic disruption worldwide. And clearing those kinds of layered threats, mines, drones, missiles under fire, extremely difficult, very dangerous.
And this ties into their use of proxies too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shiite militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen. These groups are key parts of Iran's regional strategy. They have their own missiles and rockets, allowing Iran to exert pressure, to strike adversaries, often without using its own forces directly.
Like what the Houthis have been doing in the Red Sea.
Exactly like that. The sources highlight it as a prime example, a proxy group causing major global disruption with relatively low-tech, asymmetric means.
And Iran's direct threats are pretty blunt too, that quote from their defense minister.
Yeah, basically saying if the U.S. helps Israel, all U.S. bases are fair game. A very direct warning.
So all these capabilities, these threats, they fit into Iran's overall deterrent strategy.
Right. The core goals, as the sources describe them, seem to be about regime survival first and foremost, then boosting regional influence, becoming the dominant power, and exporting their revolutionary ideology, especially against the U.S. and Israel.
And the pillars supporting that strategy are what we've just discussed. The missile arsenal, the proxy network, the naval presence in the Gulf, and maybe that underlying potential nuclear capability as a sort of ultimate insurance policy.
Even if, as reports suggest, they're not actively building a bomb right now, they're trying to deter direct attacks, crippling sanctions, and outside support for internal opposition.
But the sources also point out some significant weaknesses in Iran's position.
Yeah, definitely. For one, they don't really have major state allies who jump in militarily if things got serious with, say, the U.S.
And their air defenses.
Yeah.
They can't really match the air power of the U.S. or Israel, can they? We've seen reports of Israeli strikes in Syria seemingly getting through.
That's a consistent point in the analyses. Plus, U.S. economic pressure is a real vulnerability. Sanctions can stir up internal problems, which hits that core goal of regime stability.
And it seems like, despite having all those missiles, they've been hesitant to really unleash them against the U.S. or Israel in the past.
Right, because that risks triggering a full-scale conventional war, which they likely know they can't win against superior U.S. firepower. Deterrence has arguably failed sometimes, too. Think about the Israeli strikes in Syria or the killings of Soleimani and Fakhrizadeh. Iran's response, while present, wasn't the all-out retaliation some might have expected.
So even with the recent exchanges, there's this pattern of maybe calculated caution, a desire to avoid that catastrophic conflict.
The sources suggest that, yeah, a kind of balancing act between projecting strength and avoiding a fight they can't win.
Okay, let's pivot to the U.S. role in all this. What are the core American strategic aims here, based on the sources?
Pretty consistent themes: maintaining influence in the region, containing Iran, and increasingly competing with China and Russia for influence there.
And they back that up with a significant military presence.
Oh, yeah, around 40,000 personnel, give or take, spread across bases mainly in the Gulf, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, Saudi Arabia. You've got major air wings, the Navy's Fifth Fleet, Special Ops Commands.
Plus smaller numbers elsewhere. Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and personnel working with Israeli defense systems like Patriot and T-8A.
And huge amounts of military aid and arms sales to allies like Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, plus efforts to build that integrated air and maritime defense network across friendly nations.
So the U.S. approach seems to be, stop Iran getting nukes, but try hard not to get dragged into a major war. More about strengthening allies.
That's the back-to-basics idea, reported in some sources. Bolster allies' capabilities so they can handle more themselves, while the U.S. provides that high-end support and deterrence umbrella.
How did this play out in the immediate crisis? The sources mention specific U.S. actions, right?
They do, like ordering non-emergency staff out of Iraq, partly based on warnings about a possible Israeli attack, and confirming U.S. air defense systems helped intercept Iranian drones and missiles aimed at Israel.
And then there are the political statements. We should mention those neutrally, just reporting what the sources say. Former President Trump weighed in.
Right. He put out a statement warning Iran very strongly against attacking the U.S., saying the response would be unprecedented.
But he also specifically said the U.S. had nothing to do with the attack on Iran, and interestingly, suggested a deal between Iran and Israel is possible.
Which contrasts with Iran's official accusation that the U.S. was involved in the Israeli strikes. Washington denied that, of course. Secretary Rubio also stated the U.S. wasn't involved in the Israeli offensive, prioritizing protecting U.S. forces. So you have these conflicting narratives reported.
And this all happens against a backdrop of debate within the U.S. itself about its Middle East posture.
Exactly. There's the restraint argument, reduce the footprint, avoid getting tangled up. make allies do more, reduce targets for adversaries.
Versus the argument for staying deeply involved because of existing alliances, fear of losing influence to China and Russia, partner reliance on the U.S. security umbrella. It's a long-standing debate.
Moving beyond the main players, there are other complicating factors. Iran seems to be doing some quiet diplomacy with Arab states like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt.
Trying to manage the crisis behind the scenes. Maybe floating ideas for regional security structures without the U.S.
Possibly, like that MW-WADA framework idea mentioned. Then there's Syria. The fall of Assad changes things for Iran. Maybe less reliance on a state ally, more focus on non-state groups like their usual proxy model.
And the big external powers, China and Russia?
China wants the oil to keep flowing, even from Iran, and has economic leverage. Russia cooperates with Iran, but also competes for influence, say, in post-Assad Syria. The U.S. definitely sees this as a competition with both of them.
And maybe even internal Iranian factors. One source mentioned the easing of the dress code enforcement. Could that be linked?
Possibly a move to ease domestic pressure while facing external threats. It's speculation, but plausible.
So pulling it all together for the listener, why track all this? It seems distant, maybe?
But it's not, really. Think global oil prices. A disruption there hits everyone's wallet. Think supply chains. We saw with the Red Sea how regional instability ripples outwards. The Strait of Hormuz is far more critical.
And the risk, however small, of escalation drawing in major powers. That has global consequences. Understanding this web, the alliances, the weapons, the motives reported in the sources, helps make sense of world events.
So, to recap our deep dive, it's a very tense situation with direct Israel-Iran strikes. Iran has potent asymmetric tools, especially naval ones threatening the strait, but also clear weaknesses and seems wary of all-out war.
And the U.S. is trying to deter Iran, especially its nuclear ambitions, protect its interests, and support allies while wrestling with its own role and avoiding a wider conflict. We've laid out what the sources report, including different political viewpoints, aiming for a clear picture of the situation as described.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you.
Yep.
Given everything we've discussed, the known capabilities, the stated positions, the potential weaknesses, what are the really unpredictable elements here? What could push this one way or the other?
Is it just a miscalculation? Someone misinterpreting a signal in the middle of an attack? Or maybe internal political pressures in Tehran or Jerusalem forcing a leader's hand?
Or what about those outside players? China, Russia. Could their actions, driven by their own interests, inadvertently escalate things, or maybe help calm them? It's often those unknowns, those wild cards.
That end up shaping events.
Yeah.
Definitely something to keep thinking about.
For sure.
Okay, thanks for diving deep with us again. We will definitely be watching how this develops.